Welcome to Commune, a global wellness community and online course platform featuring some of the world's greatest teachers. We are on a mission to inspire, heal, pass down wisdom, and bring the world closer together. This is the Commune podcast, where each week we explore the ideas and practices that help us live this healthy, connected, and purpose-filled life. If you are hunkered down at home, as you should be, this may be a good time to check out our course platform at onecommune.com, where you'll find programs from Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra, Russell Brand, Wim Hof, Brendan Burchard, Adrian Mishler, and so many other brilliant personal development and wellness luminaries. Our courses span yoga, meditation, spiritual development, functional medicine, recovery, and social impact, essentially everything you need to be holistically well. And we know how important that is right now. So just go to onecommune.com. So given the gravity of the global pandemic, one might instinctually think that a meditation practice is dispensable, but nothing could be less true. If you are one of the superheroes on the front line, a healthcare worker, a medical professional, a food provider, a scientist, or a government worker, you will be stressed to your limits physically and psychologically. Even 30 seconds of deep breathing and grounding can help you stay centered, focused, and healthy. We need you, and we support you. So if you are someone on the front lines and could benefit from a meditation course on your phone, in your pocket, email me at jeffk@onecommune.com. Most of us, however, are now being called into inaction. The best thing we can do for one another, ironically, is to distance from each other. In this inaction, we are left alone with our mind, where all of existence and life is experienced. Now, as a species wired for connection, this aloneness can be torturous. As I recently heard Sam Harris insightfully point out, the most severe form of punishment short of a death sentence is solitary confinement. Most of us are simply not trained to deal with our minds in isolation. Fortunately, there are teachers who are making this practice available and relatable, and at the front of that pack is today's guest, Light Watkins. Light travels the world teaching meditation. He's the author of 2 popular books, The Inner Gym, a 30-day workout for strengthening happiness, and Bliss More, How to Succeed in Meditation Without Really Trying. He is the creator of the very popular daily email called Light's Daily Dose of Inspiration, and he also has a meditation course running right here on Commune. You can find it at onecommune.com. So if you already have a meditation practice, now is the time to lean into it. And if you don't, this is the time to cultivate one. And for God's sake, this guy's name is Light. What more could you ask for from a teacher? I hope you enjoy our conversation today. My name is Jeff Krasno, and welcome to Commune.
So I'm known, I guess, to the world as this sort of meditation teacher and expert. I never really, set out to become that. It happened almost by happenstance, and it was a process of following inspiration and these sort of celestial breadcrumbs that eventually I looked up and I was teaching meditation, and turns out I was pretty good at it, and a lot of people wanted to hear what I thought about it, and so now I do retreats and trainings, and I write books, and I talk about obviously meditation, but also inspiration and happiness, because those are kind of tied into the topic of meditation. And I'm really into the why of meditation. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know the how really well too, but now I think now that meditation has become such a accepted form of finding balance, internal balance, I think it's really important to talk about the why, because like anything else, we in our culture, our Western culture, we have a tendency to sort of put these practices up on a pedestal and make these really big claims, and people's, I think, real world experience can be quite different from what they were sort of sold, and so I just like to. And then as a result, they end up letting themselves off the hook, thinking, okay, well, it's for those people, not for people like me. So I like to bring it down off the pedestal and show people why
Mm.
it's as much for you as it is for anyone else. So that's kind of what my deal is.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you're obviously incredibly relatable. And I think that's one of your superpowers, if you will. Um, and so you bring the practice to a lot of people and you make it accessible. But on that why front, I think it is interesting. And I've been kind of poking at this lately a bit because there's a lot of, in the name of creating sort of a bigger tent for meditation, there's a lot of effort at sort of demystifying it, of like, oh, well, this is going to help you at work, or this is going to help you focus and optimal performance, and, kind of some of making life more logistically manageable. And all of that is completely true. But I wonder if in your why, you ask yourself, is it in everyone's best interest to demystify it or maybe remystify it? Because what I sometimes come to is that the reason that this practice emerged 2,500, 3,000 years ago, whatever you want to say, was potentially more mystical. It was about kind of separating oneself from desire and craving to reach a higher plane of consciousness, I suppose. And
Yeah.
and I wonder how you feel about that and how that relates to your teaching, kind of the demystification of it or potentially the remystification of it.
That's interesting to make that distinction, because I think now that I think about it, a lot of my teaching and marketing of what I do is definitely geared towards the demystification and the sort of Western, productivity incline angles. So that, because that's what people are looking for essentially.
Yeah.
But I'm also very well aware that that had nothing to do with the original purpose of meditation. Essentially making more money. It's not really why
Right.
people originally started meditating.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they were interested in wealth. It's just a different kind of wealth. There's a wealth of connection, a wealth of self-realization. And so I think humans inherently are seeking abundance. It's just a matter of what sort of abundance they value, what the currency is that they value. And with us in our culture, money obviously is one of the top currencies. But in the traditions that brought us meditation, it was feeling a sense of connection with that aspect of creation that they call oneness or samadhi or nirvana or Christ consciousness, and being able to tap into that on a regular basis. Why? Because it feels good. Just like we have this idea that if I make a lot of money, I'll be able to get a bigger place and a nicer car and, more attractive people hanging out with me. And we have this idea that that's going to feel better than wherever we are right now. And so in a way, money has become sort of our guru. If we're being honest with ourselves about it, we make a lot of decisions and prioritize a lot of things that aren't necessarily keeping us more balanced and aligned in life, because we've placed such a high value on all the things that money can buy, and we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner in our sort of capitalist society, where we have to, no matter how spiritual of a person you are, if you're a regular householder, you kind of have to, go out there and hunt, because you're only going to get what you catch, and we're not a very sort of our sense of altruism is, let me make a lot of money first, then I'll give the money away. There's not a lot of people who are thinking, okay, I'm working at McDonald's, let me see how much I can give away while I'm working here, because I know that that's going to feed into this idea of abundance, and I'm truly abundant. Like that conversation, it may be happening, here and there, very sporadically, but it's definitely not a part of the main narrative of our society.
Yeah, it's funny the kind of Tom Steyer approach that you just outlined of like, okay, yeah, I mean, accumulate great wealth for the purposes of philanthropy or giving it away. And it ties in very much to sort of the egoic mind's um, sort of obsession with the future, of like, if only I can achieve this, fill in the blank kind of success that, capitalism, modern society, consumerism, whatever, you name it, posits or puts forth. As long as I can get that, well, then, I'll have a sense of contentment in the now. But of course, that always exists in the future, and all of those pleasantries, even if they are achieved, are ephemeral versus a kind of permanence that one can find in the now, or in the contentment that is associated with the now, that can be unlocked through this simple practice.
Yeah, I mean, and if we just run the experiment with ourselves, like whatever wherever you are right now, whatever you have, whatever you've acquired, whatever you've achieved, right? Look at your baseline level of happiness right now and your sense of contentedness right now. And if there's some tension in there and some friction in there and some longing for something else other than what you're currently experiencing right now, what makes you think it's going to be any different in the future?
Yeah.
It's a practice. You have to practice that. You have to cultivate that contentedness just like you would cultivate a garden. And one of the sayings from the Vedas, which is where meditation comes from, is everybody can live in the Garden of Eden, but you have to grow it yourself. No one else can grow it for you.
Yeah, I heard a quote that you gave that I liked, which was, happiness is not a choice. It's less of a choice and more like doing a pull-up.
That's right.
So I want to go back as I'd like, for the listeners to know a little bit more about kind of you. You grew up not what I would call in the hotbed of mindfulness. I think you were born and grew up in Montgomery, Alabama, although it was the cradle of the civil rights movement. So on one level, you might be able to attribute a lot of mindfulness or ethical work to that place. But maybe tell us a little bit about that journey of growing up and how the heck you got to be a meditation teacher from there.
Yeah, I grew up very much in the Bible Belt, going to church, and the stories of civil rights figures and the movement was very much a part of the day-to-day narrative, especially within the Black communities, which is where I was hanging out mostly. But at the same time, we're talking about the 70s and the 80s, and I think what was happening back then, looking back now as an adult, what was happening back then is that, because of the after effects of the civil rights movement, which is there was more integration happening all throughout the country. I think the Black community even was trying to identify more and more with that sort of they wanted more access to what everyone else was doing. So there wasn't a lot of cultivation of an African heritage or what binding us all together based around what we had in common. It was more about, let's move to those communities so that we can, because our money is as good as anyone else's money. And, we want to have the big houses. We want to have the jobs. We want to have everything that they have. And so it's interesting because I think now we're seeing a sort of shift back towards people celebrating their own heritage, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from. There's more of a celebration of your own heritage and a realization that this quest for more is really, it's not sustainable, and B, it doesn't necessarily put you in a better position. What puts you in a better position is cultivating community and being in gratitude, and every ancient culture had those elements. And so I think now people are looking for those elements. How were they meditating back in Africa? How were they, what were the gratitude practices? And so those kinds of things are being held up now more and more. So yeah, to answer the question, it didn't feel, while I was aware of Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and some of the other, major figures, what's really interesting is hearing about some of the minor figures, the Jeff Krasnos and the Light Watkinses of that era, who maybe weren't getting national headlines, but they were people who were kind of helping to move the needle forward in that way of bringing things back to a more sustainable fashion.
Yeah, it's interesting the the notion of integration into a culture that might not actually deliver on the promises or on the dreams that you might have been seeking. And I look around at our culture today, and obviously we're in a very, very specific time right now with the coronavirus pandemic. But where essentially, by and large, capitalism has become the global religion. And unlike other religions, we actually adhere to the precepts of capitalism. And it has not been highly correlated with delivering a lot of happiness. Now, I want to qualify that by saying, like, you need to have a certain amount of available capital in your life to provide yourself and your family with structure and food and a basic livelihood. But any social scientist will tell you that over a certain amount of money, there is no correlation with happiness at all. And like you pointed out, what seems to be the core components of happiness are community and identity and sense of connection and sense of culture. I wonder if there's a new human story that might spin out of the time that we're in right now, that where people will reprioritize some of those things. And I wonder what your observations are around what's happening globally right now and what might come out.
I think so. I think that this enforced isolation that we're experiencing with this coronavirus, COVID-19 mandated quarantine. It sounds so futuristic when you say it like that, because you can imagine watching a movie in the 1980s and they're talking about this, and it's like, wow, that's the future, and here we are, living it.
No,
I think it's like a market correction, but for our spirit. It's an enforced spiritual connection because, one of the hardest things for any human to do is just to spend time on their own in a room by themselves.
Yeah.
As Blaise Pascal so eloquently noted. So we don't have a choice. We have to sort of reconcile with ourselves, with our relationships, with our community, our family. So I think what's going to come out on the other side is we're all going to be our butterflyness is going to become more fully expressed because we're in this kind of enforced cocoon together. And what that looks like, I have no idea, but I know it's going to be beautiful. And hopefully we just have that much more of an appreciation for the power of community and the power of connection, and we start to see that actually, I have all this money, but it's not really, I'm sitting here in my house by myself. It's not really, I can't pay someone to make me happy. I have to actually have the tangible connection. And that's what was feeding my soul this whole time. And I'm now just realizing it. can't have a society where so many people are experiencing so many mental health challenges. 1 in 4 people are experiencing diagnosable mental health challenges. So many people are homeless. So many people, the chasm between the rich and the poor is so wide. I mean, that's not a sustainable model. And we were modeling that for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And so, the coronavirus, in a way, it's a lifestyle thing. It actually started affecting the wealthy people first, because those are the ones who could afford to travel around the world, and it's spread through travel, basically. So it wasn't like the poor people brought this upon us. It was the wealthy people that caused it to spread so fast. And I think that we need to look at some of those habits of our society and really be honest with ourselves around what it is that we need to do. It's just like the conversation with reparations. Everyone dismissed that, but now that coronavirus has struck, now we're about to give business owners potentially trillions of dollars, which I fully understand and support. But there was no money for a whole portion of the population who had been suppressed and oppressed for hundreds of years, So I think it's the disconnect between the thinking about it that I think we need to, that hopefully this situation will help us understand that, look, these people were in that situation, in basically a corona-like situation for hundreds of years. And you just kind of dismiss their whole thing, and that doesn't make people feel good who've been oppressed. So I like the idea of the possibilities of what's going to emerge from this.
Yeah. I mean, I worry about the microscope that this is going to put on that disparity between the rich and the poor as it plays out over the next couple of months in terms of access to healthcare and who is going to be most seriously afflicted. But as you say, I do think like this is an opportunity for a significant correction. And, I almost think about it almost like in biological terms of that, we are, as our human bodies are chronically inflamed,
right,
through a host of decisions and behaviors and environment that is leading to chronic, like these epic levels of chronic disease and mental and cognitive illness, as you point out. And that how could that sense of constant inflammation not translate out, and so, it's almost like there is a global inflammation. How long could it keep going? I suppose would be the question without something happening. And the cultural replication component of coronavirus is more replicative than the virus itself, because it's essentially gotten the entire world to change its behavior in 10 days.
Right.
I want to ask you about fear and anxiety, because I think that is a huge component of life right now for so many people, including myself, as many tools as I have.
Well, going back to the quote that you stated earlier, which is happiness is like a pull-up. It's not a choice. To say that happiness is like a pull-up is literal. It's a literal translation of how the whole thing works. Just like if anyone's ever tried to do a pull-up, I mean, it was the exercise that I hated the most growing up, because when you're old enough to remember those
I know where you're going.
Standardized,
I always cheated on those with the pull-ups. Yeah.
Those tests that we'd have to do in school once a year to show how athletic we were. And it's like the pull-up was like the worst part for me personally ever, because I could barely even bend my elbows. And
well, you're very long. I'll give you that excuse, right? So.
Yeah, but still, it's like it's always been one of those impossible exercises to me. And then when I got older and I started working out and going to the gym and stuff, I was very intentional about about mastering the pullup. And it took a long time to get that first repetition, and then to get another repetition, and then to build up to 5, and then to build up to 10, and all of that. And then by the time you get to 10, doing one is not a problem at all. And so in my first book called The Inner Gym, how a 30-day challenge for strengthening happiness, I use that as the sort of key premise, the metaphor throughout the book, which is that, demands being placed upon you and changes of expectation, like, oh, you can't go out of your house now for, the indefinite future, and you can't be around other people. If we think about those emotional states as demands that are constantly coming to us, and understand that we have to condition and train ourselves to be able to tolerate them and deal with them and excel, then it gives us, I think, a better idea of what's needed for us to live a more balanced life. And happiness is something that needs to be cultivated as an adult, because we lose that from our childhood. Life kind of beats it out of us, and we need to really be intentional about reclaiming it. And once we do, things can happen, and we may find that it's easier to kind of see the silver lining, or see the opportunities, or be more optimistic, or see the bright side in all situations.
And I heard you say something once, and I'll quote it in a second. Hopefully I don't misquote it, but it speaks to this idea of the inner gym and the training that is required, of not just the body, but obviously of the mind. And right now, what you're seeing is this kind of, in society in general, right now, you're seeing this outpouring of altruism and people really wanting to help each other, just given the global situation. And I heard you say, compare helping the instinct for altruism to the oxygen mask in an airplane.
Right.
And could you actually, before I butcher it, I'd love for you to kind of like actually wind up that metaphor, because I think it's really apt right now and very important.
What was the take on the whole? You hear this in a lot of motivational talks where they say, you have the message in the airplane, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you help other people. And I just kind of point out, like, why do they say that every single time? And it's because, even though we've all heard it a million times, it's because our tendency is to want to neglect ourselves and help other people. And we don't realize that when we do that, because our heart's in the right place and we're really trying to be of service, when we're not taking care of ourselves first to get our basic needs met, we eventually become a liability. It's like my mom, she told me her blood pressure has gone up recently, and it's because, my mom looks for reasons. She's a really sweet woman, and I love her to death. She looks for reasons to worry, though, as a lot of mothers do. And there's some stuff that's been happening in our family over the last couple of years where she's been really worried and not sleeping well at night. And then she's never really had heart problems, but she went to go get diagnosed, and her blood pressure's through the roof. So, she's on the brink of becoming a liability that we all have to then stop what we're doing and go and take care of her. So she's now managing that, but that's a situation that a lot of people put themselves in by needless worrying, or by trying to, do too much too quickly, not pacing themselves. And when we really embody the sort of more Eastern understanding of this, the fact that everything I need is already inside of me, and I just need to cultivate it. And once I cultivate the proper state of consciousness or awareness, then I'll be able to see things in the external world that I can use more efficiently. And if you're in the situation where you're able to take the time to practice the self-care, then that tells you that you're in the do less to accomplish more approach to life. So you can just look at your life and take an honest assessment, and you can tell really quickly which trajectory you're in. One of those trajectories does not end well, right? Everybody's going to die, but what we're talking about now is quality of life. The other one can support you more from a quality of life perspective. And if your quality of life is great, then the quality of life, the people who depend on you, is also going to improve as well.
Mm-hmm. Are you happy?
Am I happy? Can you imagine? I was like, no, I'm not happy.
You'd be like, shit.
So
No, sorry.
I have this little sort of game that I like to play with my friends and I, where I say, where would you fall if your happiness level was 0 to 10, 10 being, as happy as you can imagine being, and 0 being you're gonna opt out of the game. Where would you fall on average? Where's your baseline? And I would say that most people's baseline is like around a 7 or maybe a 6. I would say I'm about an 8.5.
Mm-hmm.
An 8.5, right? And I like that. I don't want to be at a 10, because I think once you get to a 10, it's like, why are you even
you've
alive
transcended.
anymore?
You're the Buddha at that juncture.
Yeah.
So yeah.
If say you're at a 6 or 7 on the happiness scale, the next question is, what would it take to get to a 9 or a 10? And that's where you can see where you prioritize the most and where you think happiness is going to come from, right? So some people say more money is going to get me to a 9, right? That's the big setup.
Yeah.
And this is actually how I opened up my last book, to get to the point of, look, it's not about the money. It's not about the material stuff. It's not about anything external, basically. It's about gratitude. It's about feeling a connection with community. It's about, a lot of the things that the Blue Zone guys are already mastering. It's about finding your inner stillness. All those things are what boosts the happiness level. And now the science is actually starting to support that.
Yeah, I agree. I've started to think about happiness as the degree to which I can live a life with integrity. And for me, that is when I can align my works and actions with my highest principles, sort of regardless of external conditions.
Right.
That for me feels like full alignment. And I'll ask you this, because I've only ever known you to be kind and caring and compassionate and sort of gentle. And I wonder, were you always that way? And what is the relationship between meditation and the ethical life?
Interesting. That's a good question. I've been asked that question a lot. People, when I'm teaching meditation, people want to know, have I ever been stressed out or anxious and that kind of thing. And I've had moments. I've certainly had moments. Living life on planet Earth, everyone has moments where they get upset or angry or a little bit in a bad mood or things like that. But I've actually found that when I look back at my life, the most consistent trait that I've always had is curiosity. I've always been curious. And even when things weren't going my way, I've been curious about, okay, well, what's going to happen now? And the question usually comes, how can I be of service to people? And I just think if you make that your sort of dominant mode of living, how can I be of service, then everything else will kind of take care of itself. And I was very deliberate in that decision, in that approach many years ago. I think when I was in my late 20s, I just said to myself, I'm going to relentlessly follow my heart. I'm not going to work with people that I don't really feel inspired by, and I'm going to be of service. And I found that the more I kept those values in everything that I did, it was easy to be kind and considerate and all of those things, because it was a reflection of what my own personal value system was, and I would attract those people in those kinds of situations to myself.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's no accident that many spiritual texts and even, the 12 steps of AA,
Hmm.
culminate in this notion of a life of service. And,
Mm,
and there's a dance there between that ethical life, that engaged, active ethical life, and your own actual biological or biochemistry. As they've shown, now through kind of fMRIs um, and other science, that we release forms of neurotransmitters, um, oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine, etc., when we give. Um, and it's not just about philanthropy or money, though, interestingly enough, it doesn't even really matter what denomination you give. So, in fact,
hmm.
like the best ways to give are small denominations all the time, and that keeps your kind of biochemistry
Hmm.
cranking. Um, but that there is a correlation between literally how we're wired and this notion of a life of service. And I find that really interesting, and it needs to be cultivated because the way the systems and structures of our modern society are set up, it doesn't necessarily lead us down a straight path towards a life of service.
Yeah, and then also when you look at, I mean, I don't know, when you get in your 40s and 50s and stuff, you end up going to a good amount of funerals in your life, and
Mm.
you look at what people are saying, how people are being eulogized, and that's all they talk about.
Yeah.
All people talk about is how this person was of service. It doesn't matter how much money they made or how many accomplishments they had. Usually it comes down to how they inspired me, how they helped me, what they said that encouraged me. That's what people talk about. That's what people remember. And again, I'm very curious, so I would always go to these events, and you hear these stories, and it's like, wow, well, what is it that people remember at the end of your life? And it just became very clear to me that that's what's most important.
It's funny that you mention um, the natures of eulogies and how they never say, oh, well, this guy had a private plane, and they
Right.
never enumerate the great riches. And I think a lot of that comes from the contemplation that one goes through in times of, I guess, crisis or inflection points, or it could be death, or it could be a global pandemic, where all of a sudden the mind actually gets quiet
Mm,
and contemplates. There's a line in A Course in Miracles um, that says, "The memory of God comes to the quiet mind. A
mm,
mind at war with itself will not know eternal gentleness." Something like that.
mm-hmm.
And the memory of God. So, in a way, if we translate that not as, some geezer in a Merlin's cap up on top of a mountain or something, sort of like the memory of what is valuable, of what is true and perennial and universal. That
Mm-hmm.
memory, we reconnect with that in the quiet mind. It's made me think of this book, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which I talk
Of
about quite
course.
a bit. But in that book, he has a sort of a critique of Freud, and I think Freud says something to the effect that extreme hunger makes everyone the same.
Mm,
And in a way, what Freud's talking about is that we all devolve in times of crisis. And Frankl completely kind of dispels that idea, and he said, yeah, well, that kind of might have, that's a nice thought to have in a leather armchair, but like I
Mm-hmm.
was in Auschwitz and Dachau, and let me tell you, extreme hunger actually delineates the differences between people. It doesn't make them the
Mm.
same. It actually delineates, like, because there were people in that situation that were so dire that still found what Frankl calls the meaning in that suffering, that found the dignity to give away or share their last piece of bread or their shoes or their shoelaces. And, I have that great hope now.
Mm.
And, and I also just think that, these modalities that have obviously become more mainstream, like meditation, honestly, very much due to folks like you that have made it accessible, but that have largely been seen as, Eastern or fringe or whatever, is that are we almost going through an organic period of discovering a form of meditation right now?
Mm.
Is that possible?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like, if you tell a Navy SEAL, hey, you can't, there's no toilet paper anymore, can't go out of your house, um,
Yeah.
and they're not going to even bat an eye. It's
Yeah.
like, what? I'm a Navy SEAL. I don't need toilet paper. I don't need anything. I can just put me anywhere at any time, and I'll thrive. And and I think that this period for us is kind of like boot camp or BUDS training, which is the Navy SEALs Hell Week experience, which weeds out the people who are going to quit versus the people who are going to make it. It's like that for our spirit. It's going to help us to see that we can actually endure anything. And so this is a kind of a global way of kind of getting all of us maybe to even just have more dialogue with one another. These different cultures, these different societies. We need to share information now because it's affecting all of us in the same way. And I think it's a timely thing. It's unfortunate that obviously that people are some people are dying, but more people are dying from the symptoms of the sort of unsustainable approach from life. So hopefully, on the long term, this will cause less people to die from sort of these lifestyle behaviors that can be avoided if we just were more aware of them.
Yeah. Do you have um, any, has your sense of the role of the teacher changed at all during this time? Or what do you think that role is right now?
That's a good question. I don't honestly, I don't feel any different because
Mm-hmm.
I've always had a high reverence for teachers.
Yeah.
I just think that I think other people are now starting to sort of wake up and realize, wow, the people who can really help us to get through this are the ones that we've been treating as extracurricular activity, or been doing the let me go donate $5 to their cause or this kind of thing. But meanwhile, I'm happy to pay as much money as I feel the need to drink alcohol or buy guns or pay off this politician and these kinds of things. And hopefully that what comes out of this, school teachers will be a lot more appreciated.
Yeah.
And meditation teachers and yoga teachers and anyone who you can't access now in person, um, because of the isolation that we have to do for just a relatively short amount of time compared to life. But it's a lot, and I think that is going to show us, researchers and biologists and people who can come up with vaccines, and people who teach people like that. I mean, these are the sort of unsung heroes of society that are kind of shortchanged almost all the time until something like this happens, and then we start to see, oh wow, this is what's really truly important. So I just think that mentality of being more aware of what's important hopefully will cause some shifts in that regard. I don't expect anything to happen overnight, but I think it's a good start. And I'm looking forward to seeing the post-coronavirus world and what we do with that. And if we default back to our old conditioning, which we will probably to some extent, but what gets born out of this, and how we in the wellness community can play a role in that, both now and in that time after the whole thing passes. I mean, I'm definitely more interested in disseminating as much information as I can to help people. That was kind of one of the reasons why I wrote the book Bliss More that came out a couple of years ago. It was for situations exactly like this, to help people learn how to access meditation without all the airy-fairiness on their own, so that they can enjoy the same benefits that someone like me gets to enjoy.
Yeah. So last question for you today, and then we can do another one sometime, I hope, which is now that you can do more than one pull-up, maybe you can do 100 pull-ups or 50.
Right.
Where do you get inspiration then? Where do you go for growth and, I guess, thought leadership and inspiration now that you've achieved what you've already achieved?
That's great question. So here's my answer. I get inspiration from helping other people get inspiration. That's one way. And then I also get inspiration from seeing other people take that inspiration and they start to become more mission driven. So for the last almost 4 years, I've been sending out a daily inspirational email called the Daily Dose of Inspiration. And what that has done, that's like going to the gym for inspiration, basically, because it's a new story every day. So you're talking like 1,000+ stories so far.
Wow.
Now, I probably knew off the top, my own little cachet of stories, maybe 30 stories when I first started doing that project. So I was tapped out of that after a month and a half. And then I had to start basically looking around me and exploring and reading and researching and finding other stories to communicate. And so what I find now is that because I've been training myself to look for inspiration personally every day, it's almost impossible to have a bad day, because I'm always looking for what's the lesson, what's the teaching here, what's the story that I can share with my readers to help them have a little boost of inspiration in their life using my own experiences. And so that's become my sort of inspiration generator. And just anything else, it's like anything else, the more you do it, the stronger you get at it, the better you get at it. And I can't say it necessarily gets easier, but certain aspects of it, like the writing of it, the expression of it, does become a little bit more manageable, and you don't have to, worry about that so much. But yeah, I would say doing that, and then hearing from people who've taken those little nuggets of inspiration and they've changed things in their life and they've improved things, and they're now taking those same leaps of faith. And I think that's really inspiring and interesting. And that was also one of the reasons why I started to shine, is because I just like hearing the story of the hero's journey. And that's the event that is the variety show for basically inspiration.
Yeah,
done at Wanderlust.
That's what I was going to ask you about as the last thing, is like, what's up with the shine? Because I think that's how we initially met.
That's right.
Maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago. And I loved the shine. I loved it, partially because it was a fulfillment of something that had been dancing around my head, and then you actually did it, which is 99% of it. And just to see someone that had instantiated this new, very cool idea into life was very inspiring. So I'm wondering what's going on with it at this juncture.
Well, we did like maybe 60 or 70 events over the course of 5 years, and after our 5th year anniversary, which was 2 years ago, we decided to reimagine what it could be, because, as you know, the events were 200, 300, 350 people, all volunteer, and basically just doing it for the love. And it was a lot to organize and to manage, and we wanted to create a way for people to do it in a smaller scale in their living room. And so that became the dominant conversation.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I'd love to talk to you about that offline sometime. But using the model of like TEDx or AA or any kind of distributed leadership, decentralized form of event creation or meetup or community gathering, really, and then empower the people in their own place to do it. And so I think that's a beautiful vision. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you deeply. I've always loved all our interactions, and you've done just great work, inspiring work. So keep it up.
Thanks, man. And I'm honored to be on the podcast finally. So thanks for inviting me. And I look forward to hopefully coming back and sharing some more with the work that I'm currently doing that's going to be coming out in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, beautiful.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for listening to today's show. To learn more about Light and his work, go to lightwatkins.com. And if you have any comments or questions about today's show, shoot me an email at jeffk@onecommune.com. I always love and appreciate hearing directly from you. That's all from the Commune for this week. I'm Jeff Krasno, and I'm here for you.